Welcome to the Iowa Legislative Hour. I am your host, Kevin Hall, along with my esteemed co-host, Art Smith. Art, how are you this afternoon?
Doing great. A little less snow on the ground. We wanted to have a show last week, and you weren't going to be able to be with us, but right. I was all set to come. Brad was all set to come, and the weather just did not allow us to make that happen.
It was Snowmageddon.
Yeah.
And it turned out to be nothing.
Well, it was something, but it wasn't as bad as everybody thought it was going to be.
And then we were supposed to have a light dusting earlier this week. And
yeah. By the way, while we're talking about weather, I think we need to really do something about the whole responsibility of meteorologists in this community. And I really think, Brad, that this is something that you could introduce in the Senate and maybe get something moving along so that there's some accountability for all the impacts of telling us the wrong thing about what's going to happen with the weather.
Well, I think it's the only job position that you could have here that you could be wrong and, I suppose, get away with it, so to speak. But I certainly recognize that there was an error that was made with the forecast, and I'm so good to be back with both of you. I know Kevin was a big person on WHO radio did a good job with that.
Big around the waist.
You did a good job. I heard just snippets of it. So
thank you.
Anyway, but thank you. I don't know that we're going to offer any legislation on that, but I agree with what you said. It was bad.
It really is the only job where you can be wrong like 70% of the time. And I mean, what would happen in your job if you were wrong 70%?
Well, I'd be out of business.
Well, you'd be voted out of office for sure.
And certainly that too as well.
We are with State Senator Brad Zahn from Urbandale. This is the Iowa Legislative Hour, powered by Webcast One Live. If you'd like to join the conversation, we invite you to do so. 1-855-244-0077. That's 855-244-0077. We will also be joined by State Senator Jack Whitver coming up momentarily. Brad, why don't you just kind of fill us in on, you had a busy day today. What's been going on down at the Iowa Senate lately?
Well, we have the second final deadline is due next Friday. So a lot of committees are right now, and subcommittees are meeting to try to get those bills through committee. In layman's terms, you have to have a bill through committee by a week from today for it to still be eligible, or that bill is dead.
Okay.
So there's some good news. The good news is that a lot of bills are going to die. I personally believe that we've got enough in the Iowa code books. The longer we're there, the more legislation we pass, the more pain we inflict in every Iowan's life.
Right.
But with that said, there is some legislation, such as voter ID. I know that the House has been very active with that.
Mm-hmm.
And, of course, I did hear that the House did something on traffic cams. They did through subcommittee. There's an income tax proposal that the House is doing. And the House has been very, very active, but our committees are active as well. We had judiciary, and that's the reason why I was tardy tonight, and that's the reason why Senator Whitver is not here at the present time.
Mm-hmm.
But we are trying to there's a lot of committees we meet. Next week will really be busy because we've got a lot of, the final deadline is next Friday. I know on the Education Committee, I think there's at least 10 or 12 bills that are on the agenda, and there's going to be some other, all the committees will be really busy next week.
A couple of Democrat bills that have been unleashed in the past few days. Senate File 88, they want to increase the earned income tax credit to cover 3 times as many people as it currently covers. Mm-hmm. Any thoughts on that?
Well, I'll tell you, I'm going to defer to Senator Whitver, who is our appropriations chair. I know that he just got here. He had some meetings this afternoon, and I'm going to let him kind of deal with that because it's part of the Senate Democrats' overspending budget, the busted budget, if you would so speak. So, Senator Whitver.
Jack, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you. The earned income tax credit is something that has got various support from both parties in the past. Last year, as the Senate Republicans, we supported a minor increase in that, I think from about 5 to 7%. They want to take that up to about 20%, which would be a $56 million proposal.
Wow.
And so, I don't think there's any way it'll end up that high. In the past, the governor vetoed the earned income tax credit, period. So, that's part of the appropriations process that we'll go through. But they've definitely extended that well beyond what they have in the past.
What have you been up to in the Iowa Senate lately? Anything you think the people out there should know about just in the past week or so? Yeah,
mostly this week I've been spending time on the budget. I'm the ranking member of the Appropriations Committee, and so this week the big news was the budget targets came out, which means the House Republicans had put out their budget numbers of their proposal. The Senate Democrats put out their budget numbers, their proposals, and we're just starting to analyze those and see where they're at. The first thing that just strikes you right away, Senate Democrats want to increase spending by 10%, 10.7%, almost 11%, $600 million more than last year.
Wow.
They go back to overspending. They spend about $250 million more than what we bring in as a state. And so the lessons that we learned, or I guess failed to learn of 3 years ago, are back. I can assure you that will not happen with Governor Branstad, with the House Republicans and the Senate Republicans. We will not spend more money than we bring in, although that's what their initial budget proposal was.
I guess I'm asking you to be kind of a psychiatrist and get into their heads. Is their theory, let's ask for more than we think we'll get, and then
I think so.
Yeah.
I mean, in all fairness, yeah. I mean, we have $6.7 billion of ongoing revenue. Mm-hmm. The governor came in at $6.5 billion. So they said, if we want to end up at 6.7, we better ask for 6.9. And so they think that they can meet in the middle at 6.7. 6.7 is still too much. I think no matter what we pass this year, it'll be too much. The House Republicans, I thought, put out a fair budget as a chamber that has to govern and have a realistic budget. It was $6.4 billion. It's about a 3% increase from last year. But keep in mind, most of that increase is due to something we can't control, and that's the increased cost of Medicaid. And so on discretionary items, their budget goes up very little. Almost all their increase is due to the increased cost of Medicaid, which is why we're so concerned about Medicaid expansion. It's already a big driver in our budget that is bankrupting the country and many states, and so that's where our concern with the expansion comes in.
Let's talk about Medicaid expansion a little bit, because Senate File 71 addresses that. And, of course, the governor has come out and said he does not support the Medicaid expansion. He's getting a lot of flack from that. There's a lot of Republican governors over the past week or so, Chris Christie in New Jersey, Rick Scott in Florida, who've kind of caved on that issue and have come out in favor of the Medicaid expansion. What do you think is going to happen here? I mean, it seems like there's going to be a battle between the Republicans and the Democrats in Iowa over this.
Yeah, when I was first talking to our caucus at the beginning of session, I said this will be the defining issue of the session. We can talk about education reform. We can talk about some property tax issues. Medicaid expansion will be the defining issue. What will happen with it remains to be seen. Obviously, the governor has been pretty firm to this point that we're not going to expand it. And I think a lot of that comes just from the fact that he's been the governor for so long. He's seen Medicaid go from 12% of our budget to now 18% of our budget. And it just keeps tightening our budget as it expands. And so he is obviously very cautious about increasing that amount in our state budget. So we spent a lot of time on it this week. It went through the Human Resource Committee that I serve on, a straight party line vote. Democrats obviously supporting it. Republicans have said no. The governor has a plan that he will be releasing in the next few days. I just met with him in his office a half hour ago, talking about it to his staff about it. And so he will be releasing that plan here in the next few days. It's not that he wants to turn the back on people that need health care. He just does not believe and trust in the federal government and Obamacare.
And Brad, I know at the forum that you were at on Saturday morning, with
Thanks
John.
for coming to that.
Sure, you're welcome. Glad to be there. It was interesting. And John Forbes from the Iowa House, the newly elected Democrat to represent that area, was there. And there was discussion about that. And Governor Branstad wants to expand the Iowa Cares program instead of expanding Medicaid. What do you think is going to happen? What's your take on this Medicaid expansion?
I'm very happy about what Governor Branstad is doing with Medicaid. He's showing true leadership. And believe me, as you witnessed, you get pressured. I obviously get pressured from the people in my district, but he gets it from all Iowans. So I'm very happy, and I hope he stays strong, which I'm guessing that he will. My prediction is that it will not move because the House Republicans are absolutely adamantly opposed to that. Now, with that said, I agree with what Senator Whitfer said in regards to there's a lot of Iowans out there, and we want to make sure that they're taken care of. We have Iowa Cares program, which is expected to sunset the end of this year.
Right.
I've been told by the governor we have not seen his plan yet in regards to the extension of that, but most importantly, fully funding that. And so I feel confident that that's the solution to the problem, rather than adding 153,000 people onto the Medicaid rolls. Now, today we had a lot of people down there. The pharmacists and the hospitals were down there this morning and talking to them, and I heard that Senator Hatch was thinking about doing a 3-year sunset, because our concern is that it's federal dollars, but which, by the way, is our tax dollars, that pays for that additional 153,000 Iowans after 3 years. Well, if the lesson could be learned by history, is that once you give something, it is very, very difficult to take those benefits away. And you could just look to Europe and what's going on there. Yeah. So I'm very cautious. I'm not going to be supporting an expansion of the Medicaid, and so hopefully we'll be creative. I know there's some transportation issues. Maybe we could put a little bit of money to help some of those Iowans that have trouble getting to those facilities.
So tell us a little, if you can, just the 153,000 Iowans that they're looking to try to expand this to. What is the need there with that group of people that is trying to be addressed? I mean, obviously there's some difference with that group than the group that's already covered by what's in place.
Well, the need that's there is they're really basically talking from a geographic standpoint. Currently, right now, if you don't have insurance, you could go into Broadlawns or you could go into the hospitals in Iowa City. So there is some challenges.
And they can't turn you away.
That's correct.
Right.
And so there is some challenges from some people being able to get transportation to those areas. But you know, it's a hard issue. That's why I say let's maybe look at some helping out on some transportation. But the challenge really is the hospitals are not being, they're having to turn people away. And certainly it's an opportunity for them to be able to get more patients.
I just want to add two things. First of all, you asked what the 150,000, what's the need? Well, the biggest issue is the Iowa Cares program that we have, which covers people 100% of poverty and below. That's going to sunset. That's going to be gone in October. And so the question becomes, what do you do with those 60,000 people? And that's 60,000 out of the 150 that they're talking about. And so if we do nothing, those 60,000 are left without any solution. And so that's the immediate need that you're asking. The biggest pressure that we're getting on this issue is from the hospitals. And just so we can understand what happened with the Obamacare law, the hospitals, through the negotiations at the federal level, they made a deal with the federal government to cut all the Medicare reimbursement rates. And so with the assumption that everybody's going to be on Medicaid now. And so they cut the rates thinking there's going to be a lot more people on the system. Well, when the Supreme Court overturned that part of Obamacare and said, you don't have to expand Medicaid, that's an option. Now the hospitals in Iowa said, we just cut our rates big time expecting these people, but now they're not here. And so that's really where we're getting the most pressures from hospital. A lot of them good, solid Republican conservatives that are worried because of what happened at the national level. They're losing a lot of money that they made a negotiation in good faith that the facts changed with the Supreme Court. And so they're in a real tough spot. And what the governor has said to them is that was a deal that was cut in Washington. We need to go back to Washington to fix it, and I'll go with you if we want to go there and try to get that fixed. And of course, Governor Branstad was in D.C. last weekend with the National Governors Association Conference. I know he met with Kathleen Sebelius, the HHS secretary, and lobbied her to give Iowa a waiver for the Iowa Cares program so that it can be expanded and will be continued on in future years. You're listening to the Iowa Legislative Hour. Kevin Hall along with Art Smith and our guest, State Senator Brad Zahn from Urbandale, State Senator Jack Whitfer from Ankeny. If you'd like to join the conversation, feel free. 1-855-244-0077, 855-244-0077. Education reform. Art, I know that was one of the topics that you really wanted to bring up this week.
So there's been a lot of different activity both in the House and the Senate, in the committees, looking at different aspects of this. Part of today, my mind going to this came out of a new report that the 2012 graduating class, there was a 89% graduation in Iowa, and that we're continue to be at the top of that list. I was looking at some statistics from 2011 because last November we had a similar announcement about 2011 graduating class, and similar situation, like 88% graduating. But what I also noticed is in the same report they were showing that at the 8th grade level there was a 74% of the students in 8th grade were able to read at that level, at the 8th grade level. And so my reaction to that is, by the time they get to graduating, is that changing? And it just kind of gave me this funny feeling of we're graduating kids, but we're not necessarily graduating them and preparing them for the real world. So what are we? Where does this all fit? Just looking at these numbers and see, sorry, that's my phone. I'll fix that in a minute. But how do we see those numbers changing with some of the reforms that we're looking at doing? And should we be impressed at being number one at graduating kids if a lot of those kids really aren't ready?
Well, I would contest, and as Kevin witnessed in my forum this last week, which was filled with a lot of educators and superintendents and school board people, that we have a problem in education. So we did move the graduation rate, whatever they said it was, 96%. And they showed some of the individual school. Senator Whitford and I talked about this today. Is what I said in my forum is, and I hate to say this, but I think the challenge and the rigor to graduate the standard of that has increased, or has really come down quite a bit, substantially. I would put the kids that were graduated in the 70s and 80s, with their skills that they have and the knowledge that they have to succeed in the workforce or be prepared for college at a lot lower level. So that's great. I want to say that the reason why that happened is because we've lowered our standards is what's happened. But, you still have, and I didn't see Des Moines' graduation rate in there if they were in there today.
Mid-70s, I think, is what they reported.
And why would it be 98% in the city or the Urbandale schools and 70-something the Des Moines schools? They still say we're failing 3 kids in the Des Moines school district. Listen, for us to make the changes in education reform, we got to do 2 things, and I briefly talked about this in my forum, and it really upsets. There's nothing wrong with our teachers out there.
Right.
We got great teachers out there. Until we attack the poor curriculum that's being taught to the kids, and secondly, the poor teaching methods that they're being crammed down on we talked about it when the one superintendent, they have a new program that they're started asking the students how they feel and how much they enjoy their class.
Right.
Well, like I said, is there anyone here that actually was asked that when you were going through school?
I never was.
And so we worry too much about that. And so I will tell you that I have got a bill drafted that will be released probably Monday, and it is to shut down the Department of Education and a 100% scholarship for parents to be able to choose. I think those are the directions that we need to go if we want true reform, which allows all the local school districts, public, private, whatever, to set their curriculum, set their teaching methods, and I think that because of the competition and how it works in the marketplace, that our student achievement would go up. Now, I will tell you that I was very fortunate to listen to Milton Freeman give his last speech in San Francisco at an ALEC conference. And the question was asked about how do we get student performance up? He said, we've got to go back to a scholarship. That's what we got to do, and let it be a 100% choice in where parents send their kids to school.
Why shut down the Department of Education? What is the real benefit?
Because, well, first of all, the Department of Education costs us a lot of money as taxpayers, not only from a federal level. Obviously, I'm talking about the state level. The Department of Education was started in the state of Iowa in 1979. You could clearly see that our student performance has went down from that point. I believe, Kevin, is that we have good people that are school board members that know what needs to be done. What happens at Hyatt or middle school, right across from East High School here in Des Moines, versus what happens in Maquoketa, Iowa, their schools there, are 2 different things. And what the Department of Education does is they have one size that fits all school districts. I truly believe that there will be 2 things that will happen. One is that if you've got a really good school, public or private, parents are going to want to send their kids there. There is good public schools in the state of Iowa. One of them is where I represent, and that's Johnston. Johnston has some of the best student performance scores in the state of Iowa. If I had a student in Des Moines, I would think about open enrolling them to Johnston. So I think what it does is it rewards the good schools with students. And it's no different than going to Acceleration Iowa versus some other place. You want to go to the best place and you want to get in shape, you want to lose weight, you go to Jack's business. And so I just think you take a little bit of that marketplace lessons, and you put them into schools.
And I'm sure Senator Whitver appreciates a free plug for his business.
I do, always.
But Jack, your thoughts on Brad's bill coming up to abolish the Department of Education?
I have, to this point, not said we should abolish the state Department of Education. The Fed Department of Education would be a different story. Mm-hmm. I do believe we need to take some of the power away from the Department of Ed. So I believe that's the direction we need to go and put it more in the hands of the local districts. I haven't read his bill yet. I mean, he told me today that it's being drafted, and we'll look at it next week.
So I think that part of the problem here is that, Brad, you and I both graduated from high school without a state Department of Education.
Actually, I graduated with the first year.
Oh, you did?
I
So you're
graduated
younger
80.
than me?
I graduated 80, so.
Oh, my goodness.
Thank you very
I'm so
much.
sorry.
Thank you.
Now I'm embarrassed.
No.
No, but seriously, I mean, you know, I went through without the Department of Education, and I got a great education. As a matter of fact, I would contend that I probably got a better education than a lot of kids are getting today. And again, I echo your comments about we've got great teachers, but when they're put under the burden of a curriculum that's forced on them and practices that are forced on them by people who really don't understand the students that they're teaching, I don't know how they can possibly be as successful as they were able to be years ago.
Well, let me tell you something. Teachers spend a lot of time on the weekends filling out paperwork because of all these Department of Ed requirements on students and what's going on in the classroom, which takes time away from them being creative in the classroom. I truly believe that the school boards that are out there are more than well equipped to figure out what is best for their students. And like I said, the less the better. And you know, they're always, the forum that I was at, the superintendent, give us homeroom. I actually filed a bill in regards to that. It's one step towards that direction. And I agree with Senator Whitver, and my bill has been drafted. I know exactly, it's a lot better bill than it was last year, and I'm excited to drop that on probably Monday.
Excellent. This is the Iowa Legislative Hour. We are talking with State Senators Brad Zahn and Jack Whitver. We'll be back momentarily. If you'd like to join the conversation, 855-244-0077. We'll be back in a moment.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live.
If you choose to obey the power of sin, it leads to death. If you choose to obey obedience, it leads to righteousness.
Forgiveness is just the beginning of life in Christ. God wants us to live for Him now.
And because of Jesus Christ, the gospel was preached, and you and I are blessed today because of Abraham. Did you know that? We're blessed.
Experience Truth, 99.3 FM.
Drug and alcohol addiction slowly steals a person's identity, tearing away pieces of their life little by little until one day it seems like the hope of a happy future is gone and there's no chance of getting it back. Here at St. Gregory Retreat Centers, we can assure you that there is hope. Our unique approach to recovery begins with the understanding that the dysfunction and damage caused by addiction can be overcome, not just dealt with. Don't let another day go by. Call St. Gregory today.
Fight the good fight on a Rebels Cause Radio, Thursday evenings at 8 p.m. Central Standard Time on a rebelscause.com. A Rebels Cause Radio is edutainment.
Whether you're 10, 25, 50, 80 years old and beyond, everyone needs to live within their means. I'm Tom Coates with Consumer Credit of America. For almost a quarter of a century, we've helped people of all ages learn to manage their personal finances to benefit them far into the future. When problems arise, we've got the experience you need to make those debt problems go away. Got financial problems? Call Consumer Credit of America.
The only way we come to know the Saviorship of Jesus Christ is by bowing and acknowledging that He is Lord and King over all the earth.
Jesus Christ died on a cross, paid the penalty for our sin, and by repenting of our sin and accepting Him by faith, what He did for us, we are forgiven.
Salvation is not a combination of faith and works. Salvation is by faith alone in God.
Experience Truth, 99.3 FM.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live.
And we're back. This is the Iowa Legislative Hour. I'm Art Smith, and Kevin Hall is with me as well. And we have Senators Brad Zaun and Jack Whitver in the studio. And we've had a pretty good conversation so far. One thing I want to jump into briefly, just because there's been a couple of activities popping up around government transparency. And I think everybody probably feels like they hear that governments, we pass a law or there's an executive order from a president or a governor, and trying to get more information out in front of the constituents. A lot of times it's let's go spend $1 billion on a computer system so that people can get to all the myriad of information that's available to them through the internet. But what's happening right now? So there's one of the things that at least you guys can speak to. Around trying to improve how well constituents can see what's happening while you guys are doing business for us.
Well, that's one thing as Senate Republicans we've been working on, and it really addresses making the process more transparent and just a better process overall. So really there's two things that are involved in it. First of all, adding to every bill that we pass, adding the constitutional authority to where we get our authority to pass this law into that bill. And I think that just comes from those that serve at the Capitol that think the Constitution is a suggestion as opposed to the oath we take. And so that, I think, is an important thing, just to let the people know that we have the right to do this, and this is where we get that right. If we can't find that, we shouldn't be doing it. And I'm sure there's a lot of laws out there that we'd have a hard time finding that authority. Especially at the federal level. That's something that at the federal level would probably be more important than the state level, just because they have the more limited powers than the state. The second thing that we'd like to do is add a legislative intent to our bills. And the reason that's important is I just had a bill today that related to that, where the Supreme Court came in and they, for 33 pages in their decision, talked about what the legislative intent is. Where they got that intent, who knows? That's what they came up with, that the legislator thought the bill should be about 20 years ago. And so if we put that legislative intent into the bill or somehow into the process, it will make it more clear for courts in the future to know what we are thinking as a body. That's something at the federal level that's done often. There's a long record of what the conversation is leading up to passing a bill. At the state level, that's just not there. And there's issues with that. The reason Brad votes for a bill might be different than what I vote for a bill, and what he thinks it does might be a little different. But if we can somehow get that process, better records for that process, I think it would be a good thing towards showing the public where we're going with government and why we're doing certain things.
So is that are we looking at that in terms of rules or legislation to force that, or what's the plan around it?
I think at this point it would be about legislation. And here's another good example of where this comes into play. Regardless of what you think of the issue, we had a mourning dove bill a couple years ago. And in that discussion, there was an amendment that wanted to ban lead shot in the hunting of mourning doves. It was voted down in the House. Obviously, the House did not pass the bill with that on it. They voted on it. Yet, when the rules came out on dove hunting, the rulemaking body said, we're going to ban lead shot. Well, that's obviously directly against the legislative intent. The House voted on it and said no. But yet when the rules were made, they said yes. So regardless of whether you think we should hunt doves at all, whether we should use lead shot, that just gives you an example of why this might be important as we go through the process. So,
and I'm sorry, but the question that I was trying to get to is, are we looking at bringing a bill to enforce that type of action on the legislation, or?
Yeah, I think, I'm not sure if they want to do a constitutional amendment that says we should do this, or if we just put it in statute that every bill we pass must have those things attached to it. So yeah, it would be part of the legislative process.
Okay.
I had heard, and I have not seen the legislation, but apparently the Senate Democrats' education bill has gun reform in there. Can you guys speak to that topic? And I think that came from Senator Hatch, if I'm not mistaken.
I have not read their bill.
Okay.
What I've been told is that it's about registration in regards to if you would pass a gun on to your son or daughter or relation or someone, you'd have to register that. It is an attack on our Second Amendment. I think it's very highly, I think it's unlikely that it'll pass, but excuse me, it's just wrong that they would put gun legislation in an education reform bill.
Right.
And I'm getting hundreds of emails on this, but that's what I've been told. I have not read that, the Democrats' proposal, but I know that it's going to, we assumed this was going to happen. Certainly, this is wrong. I just filed a Senate resolution. I don't remember if you co-sponsored that, that said that we are, the state of Iowa, exempt from any executive orders from Washington, D.C., that'd be the President of the United States, or any congressional action and signed by the President, which would weaken our Second Amendment rights.
Senator Whitfer, what does controlling gun rights have to do with education?
I think you'll have to ask the other Jack Hatch, who filed the bill. I think it was Senator Hatch and Senator Mathis and Senator Sodders that filed that bill. It has absolutely nothing to do with education. I think the reason they do that is because it's part of the political game. You find the committee that has a chair that's favorable towards your issue. If you know you can't get it through state government, well, you go to education, where Herman Kornbach might take that up, likely would take that up. And so it's all part of the game, and frankly, the reason a lot of people don't trust government is because of these games.
I find it interesting. You mentioned Senator Mathis, who well known in the Cedar Rapids area and Waterloo area, being a former television anchor over there, and ran as an independent thinker. I find it interesting that she would sign on to something like that, trying to slip a gun bill into an education bill. Are you seeing more and more of this, where she's just kind of going along to get along with her caucus, her Democrat caucus?
I don't keep track of her votes.
Okay.
I don't really know that. I would say that she certainly is running on the Democratic platform. To go back to the education bill, I was told, the Democrats' proposal, that there was some language in there about safety in schools and having police officers in schools and that kind of stuff. So I think that to me is a good sign, and it's a conversation that we should have in regards to protecting our students.
What do you think about that?
Well,
having a police officer in every school in Iowa?
Well, first of all, I used to think it was wrong because there was no discipline in these schools, or there was kids that were acting out of order. But today, with this craziness that's going on in Newtown, Connecticut, I certainly believe that we need to have that conversation. Minimally, these schools need to be locked down. I can tell you that, my children go to Dowling. They did go to St. Augustine's. I cannot get into St. Augustine's here on Grand Avenue as a parent. I have to hit a bell. It is completely locked down. I think these are the conversations we need to have about our schools to protect our kids. And then, in regards to these safe zones, maybe we need to have a conversation in regards to that. I know that I've heard of an incident, I don't recall where this was, where there was a gunman in a school and there was a teacher that had a gun in his car outside and prevented a lot of children being slaughtered. So
is that in Iowa?
No, that was somewhere else in the United States. But I think we need to have the conversation. So I give kudos to the Democratic Senate education bill that we are at least going to have a conversation about school safety.
Senator Whitfer, your thoughts on having an
I
officer?
think the better way to go is to start with the lockdown procedures. Ankeny has started to do that a decade ago, and every school they build, it's hard to get in it without checking through the office and making sure they know. They run background checks, I think, really quick. When I went to speak with the government class, they did a quick check, and I think that's a much better way than mandating that every school has a police officer. The cost of that is astronomical. That's what the NRA came out with a while ago, a mandate, and I don't think that's the right solution. But could we permit them to have police officers in there if that's what the school district decides? Yeah, we could do that.
So they did a quick background check on you, and they still let you in.
They did.
I want to add.
It took a long time to do it, though. I don't know.
I want to add that when you go into this is just an example. You hit a button. There's a camera there. The receptionist looks and sees who you are, then lets you through the door.
Mm-hmm.
I will tell you that I had a meeting that I had to go to, the Central Academy here, which is an incredible school, the Des Moines schools, the old Tech High School for us old people. But, you just walk right into the place, and there's a student that kind of greets you that probably volunteers. I mean, those are the kind of areas that, we probably need to look at addressing and just making sure that there is security. The newer schools have that. I was really surprised that the Central Academy doesn't have, because they've spent so much money remodeling that school, but it's something that maybe they're doing down the road.
Going back to the education bill, now the House Republicans have their own form of an education bill, and from what I understand, and I believe it's in large part Governor Branstad's bill that they're pushing, it would hire 19 new Department of Education employees. Wow.
That's what I've been told.
What do you think about that?
Well, I'm not going to vote for that bill. That bill is going to do nothing to increase student performance. We, as Senate Republicans, have had the conversations that we're not happy with, that there isn't more school choice components in there. There is some good components. I mean, there's a component in regards to homeschooling parents get to teach their kids driver's ed and be certified to do that. There's a component in there in regards to the accreditation of non-public schools. But for the most part, I don't see really a lot of components or any components that are going to increase student performance. That is why we're having the conversation. That bill will not affect any of the 7 school districts that I represent, nor Senator Whitford's district, because the starting salary in Urbandale is $29,000, and so they've moved that to $28,000, or I think that's what the House bill ended up being for new teachers. And so we want to reward teachers, and that's a whole other conversation we could talk about all day long about how do you reward teachers, but I don't see anything in there that will increase student performance, and I will be voting no against it.
Of course, there is a large homeschooling community in Iowa, and they were cheering a lot of things that are in that House bill. Representative Forbes, we were at that forum in Urbandale last Saturday at the Chamber of Commerce, and he came out against having homeschooling families teach driver's ed to their kids. What do you guys think about that?
Well, like I said in my forum, I don't know. So does anybody put your hands up if you were taught by your parent how to drive? Well, everybody was taught how to drive. We have full confidence that they can teach our students, and their student performance skills and test scores are higher than any other public school that's out there. Why wouldn't we have the confidence for them to teach driver's ed? It just really doesn't make any sense to me.
And nobody cares about a student more than their parents.
Right.
Especially in something as important as driver's ed. Nobody cares more than that parent that's already doing that. I think it only applies to people that are already homeschooling. So you can't just take a kid out of public school and say, I'm going to home teach this one area. They're already home doing the homeschool with the student. Nobody cares more than that parent, so there's no reason they shouldn't be able to do it. The part of that bill that has got a lot of private schools excited is the independent accreditation, which means instead of the Department of Ed, and homeschoolers as well, instead of the Department of Ed sending all the paperwork and accrediting these private schools, now they can go to these national groups that are experts at it, that do it frankly better than the Department of Ed, and they can have that independent accreditation and not fall under the Department of Ed. And that's been really exciting for a lot of private schools. Frankly, that's probably going to be the first thing thrown out when it gets to the Senate. But that is what got a lot of the more conservative House members to vote for it, is that part that does a lot for private schools.
I was just about to ask you, what chances do you think that has in the Senate?
In the Senate, they're not even going to take up the House bill. They basically set it in the desk drawer, and they're going to write their own bill. It sounds like they might include some of the language from the House bill, but it's not going to be the reform we need for the state of Iowa. But it sounds like we will get something out of it.
What we want to see happen is we want to see that there be a strike all, and rather than they just start with their own bill. And the reason why is then that becomes part of the negotiation when it goes to conference committee at the very end. And if that is the case, then there is a higher probability of, like the driver's ed for homeschoolers and some of the other components that are good in there, of it actually getting into law.
You are listening to the Iowa Legislative Hour. Kevin Hall, along with Art Smith, and our guests, State Senator Brad Zahn and State Senator Jack Whitford. We are going to take another quick break. We'll be back in a moment. If you want to join the conversation, 855-244-0077 is the number. We'll be back in a moment.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live.
Drug and alcohol addiction slowly steals a person's identity, tearing away pieces of their life little by little until one day it seems like the hope of a happy future is gone and there's no chance of getting it back. Here at St. Gregory Retreat Centers, we can assure you that there is hope. Our unique approach to recovery begins with the understanding that the dysfunction and damage caused by addiction can be overcome, not just dealt with. Don't let another day go by. Call St. Gregory today.
The dawn of a new era begins.
Well, hi, I'm Rob Spearman. I'm a broker-owner of RE/MAX Real Estate Concepts in Des Moines, Iowa. Give us a call if you're looking at buying or selling a home, or if you're having trouble on your mortgage payments or looking to purchase foreclosures. We have the agents to help you, experienced, outstanding agents. Our office number is 515-276-2872. Or if you'd like to look at homes, go to our website, homeconnectusa.com.
Whether you're 10, 25, 50, 80 years old and beyond, everyone needs to live within their means. I'm Tom Coates with Consumer Credit of America. For almost a quarter of a century, we've helped people of all ages learn to manage their personal finances to benefit them far into the future. When problems arise, we've got the experience you need to make those debt problems go away. Got financial problems? Call Consumer Credit of America.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live.
Welcome back to the Iowa Legislative Hour. Kevin Hall, along with my co-host Art Smith, and our esteemed guests this week, State Senator Brad Zahn from Urbandale and State Senator Jack Whitfer from Ankeny. Gentlemen, thank you again for joining us. Got about 18 minutes or so left if you want to join the conversation. 855-244-0077 is the number. Art, you had a question for the senators.
I do, and you know, I'm gonna jump right to the thing I think is really big. Tomorrow, as most people know who are paying attention to the news, the federal government is going to hit their sequestration deadline. So there's going to suddenly be a cut. Actually, from what I understand, there's already been some impacts in several departments, but that's going to impact departments across the board in the federal government. And a number of those departments actually provide some important services to Iowans. And I think about areas like agriculture and health and whatnot. But have we looked at, has there been any discussion around how that's going to impact farmers this year who are going to be facing, potentially another substantial drought? And I don't know what the financial impact of that's going to be, but I'm assuming that there would normally be some resources there available to them to help them with that. I don't know how this is all going to impact them.
Well, how it's going to affect the farmers directly, I'm not sure of that yet. I know the total impact of sequestration on the state is about $75 million. And
that would be for the full year.
Right.
Okay.
And the whole situation is frustrating because you have a Congress and a president that created this on their own and now want to act like the world's going to blow up on something they created. It was their idea. They all signed it, both parties and the president. And now they want to act like someone else did it and they're trying to blame someone else.
Yep.
The other thing is it's an $85 billion cut. Well, the federal deficit's about $1 trillion. So we're talking about 8% of the deficit, not the budget.
Right.
They can't even agree on how to cut 8% of the deficit, which gives you very, very little hope that they're ever going to solve the real problem, which is we have $1 trillion deficit and no end in sight with it.
And the budget is $4 trillion. So, the $83 billion, which, from what I understand, only half of that would even be for this fiscal year. So, it's just that's like 1 or 2% of the budget. It's ridiculous that you can't cut that much.
Yep, and how they designed it. Secretary of Ag Vilsack came and talked to our caucus, and he talked about this issue specifically. One of the concerns he had is a lot of the federal employees that work in the state of Iowa, meat inspectors, air traffic controllers, TSA agents. That's where you can start to see cuts. But when they designed this whole sequestration, they didn't give the department heads any flexibility of how to make these cuts. It's straight across the board. And so they can't even look at their budget and say, well, we can cut here, maybe we shouldn't cut here. It's just straight across the board, no questions asked. And so that was his frustration with it, he has no authority to really be an executive and make the best decisions. And so, but from what I understand, I'm not an expert on the federal sequestration, but from what I understand, it's just really cutting the growth of government anyway. We're not really cutting much back. You're just slowing down the growth. And so, whatever has to happen, the federal budgeting process is non-existent. They haven't passed a budget in years. President Obama put out a budget, I think last year, that got how many votes? 0.
Right.
Yeah. Not one Democrat, not one Republican. It's a joke. They're not even serious about what's going on at the federal level, which is frustrating. So if this is the only way you can get cuts, so be it. I mean, they made that bed. Now we have to sleep in it. But at some point, they have to make cuts, and cuts are always painful. We've dealt with this the last couple of years at the state when we had $1 billion hole in our budget. After the Culver administration, they left us with $1 billion hole, mostly because they were using federal stimulus money and our savings account money to patch that gap. Well, once that money's gone, you're left with a big hole in your budget.
Yeah.
Well, when I got there in 2010 and the governor got reelected, we had to deal with that, and we made tough choices. And it's not easy to stand at the Capitol with people coming down every day wanting to support their program, and some of them good causes to support. But you have to make that tough decision. That's why we're elected. That's why the congressional members are elected, and that's why the president's elected. And the fact that they can't do it is extremely frustrating to me.
And the one thing that I would add is what's very frustrating is every working American out there had an increase in their taxes after the first of the year.
Because the payroll tax cut expired.
Correct.
Right.
And we, the president and the Congress, they made this deal, like Senator Whitford said. They made this deal. President Obama signed this deal. And his negotiating right now is that he wants more tax increases.
Right.
And we know what a lowering taxes do to the economy, with the example of what happened during the Bush and Reagan years. And so it's very frustrating that these people in Washington, D.C. keep thinking that they could go in with a new tax cut. And they're going to collapse our economy if they don't.
Tax increase.
That's correct. And if we do not take care of the spending problem out there, our economy will collapse anyway. And so I agree with what Senator Whitford said. I just would love to be able to send someone to Washington, D.C. These people are irresponsible. They don't have a budget. And that's the one thing you could say about the Iowa legislature, both Democrat and Republican. We've always had a budget at the beginning with the governor put out, and we always had a budget all the years I've been there, and I think there's never been a year that there hasn't been a budget. So these people in Washington, D.C., they need their head examined.
I mean, can you imagine? Just think of how we're running our country right now from our leadership perspective. We're going from crisis to crisis on a monthly basis, scaring the heck out of the American people to get done what we need to do. I mean,
yeah,
and that's all parties. I think they're all guilty of it, and that's no way to lead any kind of organization, let alone the country. Just going from crisis to crisis. Probably what they'll do is they'll kick this can down the road, some sort of stopgap, put a May 1st deadline on it, and now we're having the same crisis talk 2 months from now. But it's no way to run any kind of business or organization, let alone the country. So it's obviously frustrating.
Do you think there's going to be a call at all for the state to step in and take any action to try to help shore up what might be lost in the midst of this?
Maybe some, but a lot of it is just federal employees and federal budgets that, like I said, the meat inspectors, I mean, I doubt they're going to come to ask us to provide money to help inspect the meat.
There's not much you can do. I mean, it's federal law.
Right. And so we don't know the full impact on what they're going to ask us. I don't know that they're going to ask us for a lot. They're just probably going to have to make the tough cuts and see what happens from there.
And this is just another argument. Look at the lessons learned here when it talks about expanding Medicaid. I mean, 3 years from now, what's going to be there? You know, are we going to have the money? They claim it's going to be 90% funded. You know, if they continue, the behavior continues in Washington, D.C., that's why a lot of us have concerns.
Right. The federal government is promising they'll fund it fully for the first 3 years, and then it'll go down to 90% the fourth year and then on down. And part of Governor Branstad's argument, and the same case you guys are making, is we don't know what the federal government's going to do. I mean, they don't uphold their promises a lot of the time, so we just don't know. Senator Zahn, since you went there and talked about sending people to Washington, we asked you about this 2 weeks ago, and you did correctly predict off air that you didn't think Congressman Latham would run for this U.S. Senate seat, which he announced yesterday he would not. What is your thinking in terms of potentially seeking the U.S. Senate seat at this
I'm
point?
going to make an announcement here today.
Okay.
I am going to be the honorary campaign chairman for Whitford for governor, and in a little over 4 years from now. But to answer your question, and by the way, he is going to be the future governor of the state of Iowa. He's an incredibly talented person. I tell him that all the time.
I think he has a very bright political future.
Obviously, with Congressman Latham getting out, that has really changed the scenarios that are out there. As I mentioned last time before, I've had a lot of Iowans and had a lot of people contact me in the last 24 hours in regards to this. I am telling you, Kevin, that I'm taking a very serious look at putting something together.
Okay.
I still want to have some conversations with some people. Getting a lot of emails, and like I said, it's kind of been on steroids the last 24 hours. Right. So, it's going to, I believe that really to be successful, I've learned a lot of lessons when I ran for Congress, and they were lessons that were learned very hard. I can tell you that it'll be a complete different campaign if I do decide to get in. Certainly, we don't know what Congressman King's going to do, and he is someone that would be very, very strong. We all know that. And there's obviously with polls, there's some concerns if he would be able to do it statewide.
Right.
I think that you're going to have a lot of people that are going to get into this, that are considering having this race. I, for one, am very, flattered that I would even be considered for something like that. And it's a big step. And my focus is the Iowa Capitol work and the work that I need to do, but we're having those conversations.
Okay. Let's get back to the Iowa legislature. One bill that one of your Republican Senate colleagues is pushing is reinstating the death penalty in Iowa. Senator Kent Sorensen out of Milo is pushing that. Gentlemen, your thoughts on reinstating the death penalty? And of course, this was brought about in large part because of the tragedy of the two girls who were kidnapped up in northeast Iowa and were found dead a couple of months later.
Yeah, this is a bill that I actually co-sponsored, and as a pro-life legislator, it's a tough decision to make. And I ultimately came down to the side of protecting innocent life, and signed on to that bill. The bill is, I think, as far as the death penalty goes, a pretty moderate proposal as far as expanding the death penalty. It limits the death penalty to cases where a child is raped and kidnapped. Raped and killed or kidnapped and killed. And so it's very, very specific, basically protecting our kids, sending the message to anyone that wants to do harm to our children that it won't be tolerated in Iowa. And I did sign on to that bill.
Senator Zahn.
This is a difficult issue for all of us. And there's been a lot of advances in science in regards to getting a good conviction on these hideous executions. Obviously, it is because of the two young girls up there. When I first started in the Iowa Senate, it was just Setta Gage, the young girl from the Cedar Rapids area that was raped and killed. I am not a death penalty advocate. I typically would never support anything like that. But if you do the disgusting thing to a young child, there is no stiffer penalty if you just go ahead and kill off your witness. And I think that's what they're trying to make the penalty stiffer. And personally, these people, in this extreme, terrible situation, it is something that I would support a death penalty on that.
I've heard Democrats make the argument they don't understand how conservatives, like all of us at this table are, can be pro-life but then support the death penalty. Can you guys explain the mindset of how you can be pro-life but in favor of the death penalty in certain situations?
Yeah, I think it goes back to protecting innocent life. Mm-hmm. And you think about a baby that's 20 weeks old in the womb, obviously we're going to protect that. And they're exact opposite of us on this.
Yeah.
They're willing to let that baby be aborted, yet the person that rapes and kills a child, they don't want to kill that person. So, I am totally comfortable with that decision, protecting innocent life. Someone that decides to come into our state, rape and kill, kidnap and kill one of our kids, to me, has forfeited that ability to be in the state of Iowa.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Art, you have?
I was going to ask you about something that came up in the news last week. A couple of years ago, there was some big to-do because the city of Des Moines had been charging a franchise fee that exceeded the statutory limit, as I understand the statutory limit, and I think it might have been one of those things where they had been charging the fee and the statute was changed and they continued to charge the fee. At that point, that they were beyond the statute. At any rate, eventually, case came to court. They were instructed to return the money back to the citizens. And then a group of citizens went ahead and filed another case against the city for the interest on the money. And last week, a judge basically denied them the interest on that. I'm probably just spouting off my frustration about how government operates. But frankly, taking my money and holding it illegally, whether legally or not, I mean, if it's our taxes, and we kind of have given in to the idea that we give our money to the state and federal government throughout the year, and then if there's any to come back, we get it at the end of the year without interest. The government benefits from this particular arrangement, and I'm not a fan of the income tax. I'm not a fan of the government in any situation holding my money and then giving it back to me and keeping the interest they earned on that. It seems to me that, and we talked a little bit last time we got together about potential changes to the tax structure in Iowa and how we can deal with that. But is it right? I mean, is it right for the government to earn interest on my money while it's holding it as basically as taking it captive from me in the first place?
No, and that example that you bring up is a classic example of why people are frustrated at government, because Des Moines collected a fee on top of what they should have. The citizens sued them to get the money back. Des Moines said, we don't have the money. So they came to the legislature, got legislation passed to raise taxes to pay the people back. So they raise taxes, collect the taxes, and give it back to the people to pay off the settlement. Luckily, I believe, I'm fairly certain the governor vetoed that part of the legislation to not allow them to do that. But that is extremely frustrating that they take more than they should. They come to the legislature, say, okay, well, we just want to raise taxes to pay the people back. I mean, it's craziness. And, I don't even know what to say about it, frankly. I mean, it's a frustrating situation, but I am proud that the governor vetoed it, and I asked his staff before the bill went down there to see that we could get that done, and I'm glad he did.
You did a better job of explaining the story than I did.
Well, this goes back to when I was mayor of Urbandale. Mm-hmm. What happened is the legislature, the Republicans that were in charge, and I believe Governor Vilsack was governor at that time. They passed legislation. It was a deal the last day or day. They passed legislation to back off the sales tax on our electric bills, is what it was, and our gas, our utility bills. And so what happened is the city of Des Moines thought, wow, there's an opportunity for us to tack that back on, which was illegal based on the court decision. And I thought it was really wrong. I know that in Urbandale, there was the temptation, as some of the other cities did. I don't think Ankeny did it. But there was obviously the city of Des Moines, and it's one of the reasons why I ran, because it is wrong that that's going on. And to answer your question, it is wrong that the government is using your money. People get so excited when they get a tax refund, but you paid for it, your money, you overpaid, and you should get interest in regards to that.
Here in the final minute of the show, I want to get to the one question that I feel is the most important one to ask, and in particular, Senator Whitfer, as a former Iowa State University athlete, what kind of legislation can you pass that will do something about referees that decide the outcomes of games.
Boy, that was a tough one, wasn't it? Between the Hawks and the Cyclones not finishing a game this year, it's been a rough basketball season, but that was a great game.
Oh, it was unbelievable. But, yeah.
You know, you got to give Kansas, the refs screwed up, but you got to give Kansas credit. They made huge three-pointer after three-pointer at the end of that game to win it. Yeah. Is what it is.
Gentlemen, any closing thoughts?
Nope. I mean, the session's really starting to heat up, and we're going to start getting into the really heavy-duty, big-time issues the next couple of weeks, so it's getting kind of exciting. We'll see what happens.
Well, Kevin and Art, I thank you both for allowing both of us to come on, and it's an honor to be with you.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you guys.
Appreciate it.
That's it for this week's edition of the Iowa Legislative Hour. Join us next Thursday at 4:30. For Art Smith, Senator Brad Zahn, Senator Jack Whitver, I'm Kevin Hall. We'll see you next week.